Did Michael Wilson bring good news or bad news to people with disabilities when he unveiled his budget 3 weeks ago? The jury is still out. Hello and welcome to DNET, the Disability Network. I'm Joe Coughlin. People with disabilities are still not sure whether they like or don't like Michael Wilson's latest budget. We have a special report later in the program. Diseases such as polio still affect many people in developing countries where wheelchairs aren't readily available. We'll hear how local resources and computer technology can make those people mobile again. And Jim Kyte, who has a hearing impairment and plays for the Calgary Flames, has some advice for aspiring NHLers. First, here's this week's roundup of disability news. A federal court has said there is no basis for legal action taken by disability groups to enforce the Federal Employment Equity Act. Lawyers for Employment and Immigration Canada were successful in having the motion thrown out of court. Legal action was taken by 4 disability organizations who are members of a coalition called Disabled People for Employment Equity. They had charged that companies were including people who wear glasses and have other marginal disabilities when reporting employment equity figures. A lawyer for the 4 groups says the decision will be appealed. The debate over Canada's future is an ongoing dialogue from coast to coast. In Ontario, a legislative committee toured the province seeking out opinions on the future of Canada. Many people responded, among them representatives from disability groups.
The Select Committee on Ontario's Role in Confederation sent MPs from all parties across the province in an experiment in grassroots democracy.
What we're trying to do is get the citizens of this province to really tell us what's on their mind.
The committee moved quickly, 21 cities in 4 weeks. It heard from hundreds of people. The committee tried to reach everyone. The hearings in towns were broadcast to the rest of the province by satellite on the government's own parliamentary channel. Deaf MP Gary Malkowski was an NDP member of the committee. His presence encouraged many to speak before the committee.
But deaf people should be able to have access to that.
Kerry Wadman spoke for the Canadian National Society of Deaf-Blind. Wadman cautioned that for all Canadians to understand their role in Confederation, society must make sure that everyone can participate in the dialogue.
As deaf-blind persons, we are supposed to share the same values and human rights as everybody else. The key difference is that being deaf-blind, most of us do not even know we have these values or rights because of the lack of information accessibility.
The committee will be presenting its final report in June. Doctors at the University of Alberta plan to test a drug that may help cure osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is a disabling bone disease. Linda Steele has the details.
Osteoporosis is a painful and debilitating disease that strikes 1 in 4 Canadian women. Normally, bone material is continually lost and then replenished. But in an osteoporosis victim, the loss exceeds the replacement, causing the bones to become less dense or brittle. And that can lead to a compression fracture in the spine. This one is normal. This one is compressed. The victim becomes progressively stooped to the point where their rib cage can actually end up sitting on top of their hip bone.
In the past, doctors could offer no treatment to victims of osteoporosis, no hope. But a decade of research has led to the development of a new drug called alendronate, a possible cure for osteoporosis. The drug is about to be tested in 17 different countries. In Canada, clinical trials will be carried out by 2 doctors here at the University of Alberta.
Doctors say if the drug really works, it would go a long way to reducing both the social and economic costs associated with osteoporosis.
In medical economic terms, this is a massive problem, which probably costs up to $1 billion in direct costs in Canada each year. That will be reduced. And in social terms, we're going to have a population that is not disabled by fractures and the aftermath of fractures.
If the clinical trials are a success, the osteoporosis drug could be available over the counter in about 5 years' time. Linda Steele, CBC News, Edmonton.
Canada is going to be the focus of a major event next spring that will see participation from disabled persons from more than 80 countries.
In April of 1992, Vancouver will be host to a major exposition and Congress on Disability, Independence 92. The event will take place at the Vancouver Trade and Convention Center and is expected to attract about 8,000 guests and delegates. Independence 92 will focus on issues of importance to people with disabilities of all ages. It will be a unique opportunity for exhibitors and delegates from around the world to share experiences, knowledge, technology, and information. Of particular importance will be the 4-day Congress, which will see the presentation of 200 papers by delegates from 80 countries. Rick Hansen is the chairman of Independence 92. He says it will be the largest event of its kind in North America. Hansen says that independent living is the goal behind the exposition.
The theme, as you can imagine, with Independence 92 is self-determination by people with disabilities, giving people who have disabilities the opportunity to influence their destiny, to make choices in life. And if we can move it one step further in that area, I think we'll have accomplished the goal of what the Independence 92 objective has always been about.
Disability Network hopes to bring you a special program on Independence 92 next April. And that's this week's roundup of disability news. And now our look at the federal budget. Governments in recessionary times tend to be very cautious, and that's certainly the case with Michael Wilson's budget. For people with disabilities, it offers some positive measures, but it also raises some serious concerns.
When Michael Wilson unveiled his 7th federal budget last month, the consensus was that it was going to be a tough recession budget, and it was. Wilson handed out little and kept a tight-fisted control over fiscal policy. But Wilson did loosen the purse strings a bit, and in a no-win budget, the disabled community did come out ahead.
The disability tax credit will be increased from $575 to $700 as of the 1991 taxation year. The definition of expenses eligible for the medical expense tax credit will be broadened and will include the cost of part-time attendance in the home. Costs incurred by employers in modifying their premises to accommodate disabled persons will become fully deductible in the year they are incurred. Benefits provided by employers to disabled persons to enable or assist them to work will no longer be treated as taxable benefits.
These initiatives sent two signals: that the government was moving on disability issues, and more important, Wilson was acknowledging that the costs of disability were as big a barrier to employment as attitudes. Greg Pick is with the Canadian Paraplegic Association and says the budget is a positive first step.
It acknowledges environmental concerns that we have with respect to employers and their incentives to hire disabled people, and it also acknowledges some of the extraordinary costs of a disability that will no longer be taxed back to the disabled person.
But the budget also raised concerns. The disability tax credit is now defined in the Tax Act. David Baker represented the Coalition of Provincial Organizations of the Handicapped in meetings with the Finance Department. Officials there were worried about the abuse of the credit.
The concern is that they've changed the wording of who is eligible.
Michael Wilson says that's not the case at all.
No, I wouldn't think so at all. We did, as you know, broaden the definition of disabled for purposes of the Income Tax Act, and I am not aware of any changes that we have made, both through technicalities or regulations, that would narrow that.
Wilson also extended the freeze on the amount of money transferred to the provinces for programs such as social services and health care. It's a part of the federal expenditure control program under Bill C-69. But critics are charging that it's the first step in the end of the health care system.
This is the day that Michael Wilson and Brian Mulrooney killed Medicare.
What's at risk is the access to national standards in health care, where a simple card gets you treatment from St. John's to Victoria. That's how it's worked for the past 3 decades. Back in the 80s, doctors and hospitals in some provinces chose to extra bill. It didn't work. The federal government collects the tax dollars for health care and transfers them to provinces. Ottawa said no to extra billing and threatened not to hand over the tax dollars.
And that's a financial stick that the federal government has to make sure that health care, probably our most cherished of social programs, is universally available across Canada.
Bill C-69 could change that. Critics say that in 15 years, provinces will collect their own taxes, and Ottawa's ability to enforce universal health care will be gone.
I think the question will be whether the provinces just reject out of hand the imposition of national standards when the federal government is paying nothing towards the cost of the program being delivered.
The healthcare system plays an essential role in the lives of many disabled Canadians. We'll continue to follow the path it takes in the future. Coming up next, hybrid wheelchairs. Throughout North America and Europe, wheelchair styles have been evolving at an increasing rate in recent years. The traditional style of chair has been joined by sports chairs, motorized chairs, lightweight models, and scooters. But other parts of the world, especially poorer countries, have a lot of catching up to do. Problems faced by disabled people with mobility impairments in third world countries like Thailand and parts of Africa are entirely different than those faced elsewhere. Diseases such as polio, eliminated in many countries, still form the basis of much disability in the third world. And most wheelchairs designed for modern cities are not available, affordable, or suitable to meet the particular needs of developing nations. But state-of-the-art technology, which has helped create the innovative wheelchair designs of today, is now being used to help design affordable and practical chairs for the third world. Ralph Hotchkiss is a mechanical engineer living in San Francisco. He was disabled in a motorcycle accident. Hotchkiss has devoted his life to improving the mobility of disabled people through the creation of low-cost wheelchairs.
One of the big problems, of course, is paying for these chairs. In all of the countries we've worked so far, the shops have been relatively small, and most of the customers have had to pay for their chairs on their own, out of their own pocket, which limits the chairs to a large extent to people who are already working, who are already self-sufficient. The people who need it most are the ones least likely to be able to buy them.
Hotchkiss works to tap the technology available today. The end result? A hybrid chair. Innovative design coupled with readily available local materials.
It's good for helping with calculating the stresses and the balance. A very good example of applying high-tech to low-tech on the other end of the spectrum in cost of third-world wheelchairs are the chairs being made now in Khao Dung and Site 2 in Thailand. These chairs are all wood frames, but use good bicycle tires with nice fat pneumatic tires. They roll well over rough ground, and as compared to many of the chairs in other parts of the world, they have a wheel arrangement that makes it easy to pop a wheelie, to get over rough terrain, to put all your weight on the drive wheels. They've taken advantage of the state-of-the-art chairs and applied them to the very cheapest chairs in the world. And if a full family of chairs ranging from that to this chair, or hopefully a better chair than this one by the time it happens, can be created with a price range of, say, $50 to $150. And if they can be made available everywhere, then people, if they can possibly scare up $50, can get started on the road. By the time they go to university or into a factory job, perhaps they can afford one of the more expensive models. And the difference, there are 10 million people in the world who don't have chairs now. If they can just get on the road, they're on the way to self-sufficiency, making a good living, and making a big difference for all of their societies.
Many of our viewers live in smaller communities, rural areas, and in the north. We'd like to know if you have any thoughts on wheelchair design, or if you've come up with any novel ideas to help you get around. We'll give you our address at the end of the show. Coming up next, summer school for kids with hearing impairments. Summer school on the ice. Many of us follow professional sports, games like baseball, football, and basketball. You don't usually think of disabled people competing and rising through the ranks in these sports, but they do, even in our national pastime, hockey.
Most children who play hockey dream of a career in the National Hockey League. For some, just playing the game is a thrill. In 1982, the dream became a reality for an 18-year-old with a hearing impairment. Jim Kyte was selected 12th overall in the NHL entry draft. Kyte's size, strength, and ability to play the game put him on an even playing field with others drafted that year. Shortly into his career, he was introduced to a unique hockey school formed in Chicago, Illinois. The Stan Mikita Hockey School for the Hearing Impaired was established for children who might not otherwise get the chance to play. Kyte was impressed with the organization. However, the school doesn't accept Canadian children.
With hockey being the pastime for Canadian children in Canada and so forth, I thought, how come there isn't a hockey school for kids in Canada like this? So I, along with the help of certain people, I started a school in Canada, and with the Jim Kyte Hockey School for the Hearing Impaired, and it's been going on for 5 years now.
Kyte's school accepts boys and girls between the ages of 7 and 17 who have a hearing loss in both ears. The players are split into 2 skill groups. Although the kids take part in a rigorous workout of puck handling and skating drills, Kyte says hockey is the secondary reason why kids come to the school.
They think they're coming to a hockey school, but really I want them to come to a school where they can improve their self-confidence, play a sport that they aren't given normally a chance to play in their own community because of certain problems with communication or the coaches or the community club. And that way that confidence will overflow into their lives back home, and hopefully that's what we accomplish.
Several factors have led to the success of the school. The Kyte family has been behind Jim's efforts since day one. Mother Gail is the treasurer for the school. Sister Ainsley is the general manager. And brothers Robbie, Murray, and Frayne act as on-ice instructors. The school also depends on the support of the community and corporate sponsorship. But without Jim, the school would not exist. Throughout his life, he has strived to be the best he can be, both on and off the ice. And that's the philosophy he stresses to the kids.
If you think you have a handicap or a disability, that's exactly what it is. If you go out there and just use what you have to the best of your ability and work really hard, then you can, in my mind, you can overcome any obstacles.
Jim Kyte School runs from July the 6th till the 13th in his hometown, Ottawa. If you're interested in attending, the deadline for applications is April the 1st. For most Canadians, transportation is taken for granted. If you want to go somewhere, you simply hop in your car, truck, or van, and away you go. But many disabled people don't have the same luxury.
While modifications to vehicles have allowed some people with disabilities to hit the road, for the most part, people with severe disabilities have been forced to rely on others for their transportation needs. Thanks to some new technology, though, things are starting to change. 3.5 years ago, Brian Keane became a quadriplegic. He was totally dependent on others to get around. Now, with some unique design conversions to his van, he has regained some of his independence.
Well, having only been injured 3.5 years ago and being used to the independence of a vehicle like most Canadians, it has allowed me and afforded me the opportunity to return to that kind of independence. I'm coaching hockey and for pursuing schooling. I can come and go as I please, and I'm not at the mercy of the various services out there. So it's increased my independence to 100%.
What kinds of custom-made conversions have been done to this van?
Well, the actual customizations offset the steering wheel to the right. They've taken the gas and brake system. It's mounted. It's a vacuum-powered system, and it's gas brakes, the forward for gas, backwards, much the same as a boat. And the all the electrical components, the gear shifting, the starting, the ignition, these are all up on one computer pad for ease of operation.
And as Keane points out, he can also steer the van using very little strength.
The steering itself, it's what they call a no-resistance steering. It's comparable to power steering, but it's only probably 10 times more powerful.
Like superpower steering.
Superpower steering, so the weight of your hand will turn it.
Those modifications keep getting more sophisticated. Conversions for vans and other vehicles are available in most major Canadian cities. If you'd like more information on what's available in your area, call the local branch of the Canadian Paraplegic Association. Coming up next, learning and teaching differently. People spend many years in school getting an education. When they go, should they always be obliged to fit into the existing system, or should the system be flexible enough to meet their needs? Those questions are especially important to people who have learning disabilities and to people who work on school boards.
Errol Young is the chairman of the North York Board of Education. He also has a learning disability. For years, he struggled to fit into a system that measures success by how well a person can read or write. Young says it was these standards that laid the foundation for what would be a disappointing academic future.
The school system tries to teach you to read and write, and people with learning disabilities can have problems in those areas. In the early grades, they tried to teach me to spell accurately, and I just couldn't get the gist of it. And which meant that when I wrote anything, I always had at least 5 marks off every paper. I was 5 marks stupider than the next kid. Or if I tried to do spelling tests, it was almost a wasted effort. And so basically it affected my literacy.
Young failed grades 2 and 8 because of his inability to spell words correctly. He eventually turned to computers to help him function better in today's society. He says with the advent of the computer age, there is no reason why people with learning disabilities cannot attain success in life.
If you allow me to take in a computer, I'll compete with anybody else. If I can have those advantages, myself, personally. There are kids who are dyslexic, who may have to have things happen to them orally. What would they do with a page after page of materials in front of them? Yet they still can contribute to society, and they still can become relatively literate through other means. Why shouldn't they be given a chance?
After his second year at the University of Toronto, Young decided to call it quits. He quickly discovered that because of his disability, his path to employment would take him in many directions.
I didn't have a career path, I think, because of disability. So I searched out many options. And it did have a pattern in that I tried to go to things that were non-written, were more visual, like driving or photography.
As for the future of the educational system, Young says literacy must be the top priority. If it isn't, then Young feels the current teaching methods will have to change.
I believe we should be turning out literate individuals by the end of the 14, 15 years of schooling we give them. And if we don't do that, then we better look at what's inappropriate. It's either the teaching style or the cultural mix or whatever's happening. We had better take this very costly instrument, the education system, and attune it to do a better job.
Many viewers missed our half-hour special on students with learning disabilities. It was preempted in parts of the country because of the Gulf War, so we'll be repeating the program in a few weeks. Next week we have another special. It emphasizes teamwork and integration. Disabled adults and street kids work side by side at a corner grocery store in Brantford, Ontario. We'll see how the combination is working out. And that's our show. I'm Joe Coughlin. See you again next week. Remember, we'd like to hear from you. You can write to Disability Network at CBC Television, Box 500, Station 8, Toronto, M5W1E6. That's Disability Network, CBC Television, Box 500, Station 8, Toronto, M5W1E6. Our fax number is area code 416-975-5636.